Today we are going to talk about the end of times. Let me read from the Gospel what Jesus is saying about the end of times. In Matthew 24, 3 through 8, the Gospel says, "The disciples came to Jesus privately, saying, 'Tell us, when will this be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?' Jesus answered them, 'Beware that no one leads you astray. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Messiah, and they will lead many astray. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed. For this must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All this is but the beginning of the birth pangs.' Then Jesus says, 'But in those days after that suffering, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, and the stars will be falling from heaven, and the powers in the heavens will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory. Then he will send out the angels and gather his elect from the four winds and the ends of the earth to the ends of heaven.' Then we have prophecies in the Old Testament, and that talks about signs before the end of times. Wars and insurrections, fall of kingdoms and governments, famines, pandemics, natural disasters, cosmological changes, false prophets, antichrists, Israel restored in their land, the Jewish people back in Jerusalem, even increase in travel and knowledge about other cultures as prophesied in Daniel." Jesus says in Matthew 16:28, and this is something very remarkable, and we need to pay attention to these words. Jesus says, "Truly I tell you, there are some standing here who will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." Jesus said this 2000 years ago. Everybody who stood in front of him passed away. So, in a literal interpretations of the second coming, these words of Jesus contradicts every literal interpretations of second coming. The second coming, as described in the Bible, has tons of mystical relevance. So in terms of mysteries, what does that mean to us? Now, when I say mysteries, what does mysteries mean? Jesus says in Matthew 16:23 to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, for you are setting your mind not on divine things but on human things." Well, this is the interpreted versions of the Bible. But when you are really reading the ancient translations of the Bible, these words say that you are not thinking like God, but thinking like human beings. Some versions say, you don't have the thoughts of God in your mind, but the thoughts of human beings. So what is relevant is the thought of God is extended to all of us who seek. That's the message of Jesus. So what is this thought of God? Let's contemplate on that. But before we contemplate on the thought of God, we must become aware of another thing that is taught in churches, both Catholic and non-Catholic churches, and that is fear of God. We cannot fear our beloved and love them at the same time, even if the beloved is God, because fear and love cannot coexist. Fear dispels love, and love dispels fear. So in other words, we cannot fear God and love Him at the same time. See, love, on the other hand, it develops in us a remarkable freedom, which in my book and in many of my discourses, I describe that as inner freedom. See, it develops in us a remarkable state of inner freedom to express our love. See, this inner freedom helps us transcend all kinds of fears, even the fear of death. See, we have many saints, many martyrs in the church who joyfully embraced death. They did not fear death. See, this is really what ought to develop in us. And if we remain in the fear of God, we do not have the inner freedom. When we do not have the inner freedom, we don't even know how to think, or we don't even have the awareness to inquire into the words of God and seek wisdom. If there is any prayer at all, pray that we transcend the fear of God and become incredibly loving towards God. When we have the love of God in us, everything begins to unfold. All of our trials will settle down. All of our anxieties will settle down. All of our wants, needs, attachments, everything settles down. And there develops in us an incredible freedom to love unconditionally. Not only our neighbors, not only our family members, even God we can love unconditionally, just the way God loves us. So, when we seek the realization of the love of God, we are also seeking wisdom. See, love of God is not a concept. It is not a theory. Love means there must be expression. There must be touchy-feely exchanges between the lover and the beloved. Love is not a theoretical phenomenon. Love is an expressed freedom. It is a freedom that we express, and that is expressed in the form and the emotion of love. That is how God expresses love towards us. He expresses us in His inner freedom. That is why it is so unconditional. And we need to realize this love. It is not a concept. It is not a theory. It is not something that is out there for us to believe in. It is something for us to experience. This is spiritual seeking. In other words, when we seek to realize the love of God, invariably we are seeking the wisdom of God. And when we are seeking the wisdom of God, that is what spiritual seeking is all about. It is not a knowledge we seek. It is not a belief we seek. It is a knowing we seek. It is in this knowing we know everything, even the thoughts of God. Yet, the Catholic Church describes this journey in mystical theology. Now, the Church does not want to extend mystical theology to the seculars because people who are embracing mystical theology, they must be closely observed, closely watched. Because, when we are practicing mystical theology literally, that involves participation even in the sufferings of Jesus. So often it involves experiencing a lot of pain. See, many of our saints have experienced the wounds of Jesus. Now, that doesn't come about without sufferings. Many of our saints have embraced torture, embraced death, embraced incredible sickness. All of these involve sufferings and participation in the suffering of Jesus. That is why the Catholic Church is careful about who gets involved in practicing the actual mystical theology of the Church. That's the reason why the mystical theology is practiced in the Catholic Church within religious confines, in religious communities, in other words. The Capuchins, the Carmelites are some of the orders that strictly practice mystical theology. And we have many saints in these orders, many saints. The other denominations, however, they completely reject mystical theology. So secular Christians are without a clue about this vital hope of God. And that hope of God is establishing a kingdom on earth. See, we all believe in a kingdom in heaven. But Christ continuously talked about a kingdom on earth. We don't have that yet. We think prosperity gospel is kingdom on earth. No. Kingdom on earth is a lot more involved than prosperity. It involves peace, harmony, expression of unconditional love towards our neighbors, total healing. It involves a lot. It's not just prosperity. Prosperity is a small part of God's blessings, very small part. So, in spirituality, the second coming directly attributes to revelations, apparitions, and encounters as we remain faithful and steadfast on our journey of seeking. And these encounters are very real, physically and spiritually. That is why we call these realizations, not understanding. This is realizations by way of knowing. For someone who has encountered Jesus in this life, as Jesus said, someone standing here will experience a second coming before they meet their death. So, for someone who has encountered Jesus in their life, second coming is totally irrelevant. Whether it is second, third, or fourth, not relevant at all. Jesus is already in their life. So, let us look at the human intelligence. In other words, Jesus is saying, you need to think like God, not think like human beings. So, what is human intelligence and how do we think? See, we think in chronology. We think in events. We think in absolutes. We think in time intervals. We think in relativities. We think in connectivities. Cause and effect. Orders. Logical sequence. In wisdom, none of these exist. Wisdom is not knowledge. Wisdom is not at all human knowledge. It is knowing. In wisdom, we know everything. Without wisdom, all these signs about second coming, they do make literal sense. With wisdom, they reveal something altogether different. Without wisdom, second coming is something to be afraid of. With wisdom, second coming is something we look forward to as we progress in our spiritual seeking. It is a providence for everyone who seeks a life in Christ in their lifetime. The spiritual perspectives on second coming is somewhat different. See, when we are looking at wars, insurrections, fall of kingdoms and governments, famines, pandemics, natural disasters, see, Jesus is talking about a collapse of everything that is put together by way of human intelligence. That is going to come to an end. Jesus is talking about women who are pregnant and nursing. See, this in spirituality means something altogether different. This means the attachments mothers for their young infants, even their fetuses. They are so attached to them. Jesus is talking about detachment even to our children. So So when we are spiritually evolving, detachment naturally evolves even towards our loved ones. Let's talk about it a little later, but let's remain on this subject. See, Jesus is talking about false prophets and antichrists. What it means is these are people who challenge our intellectual knowledge about God. See, when we are in wisdom, when we are of all knowing, false prophets and antichrists have no influence in our mind, absolutely no influence. It happens, they have an effect on people who really are not thinking in a way God is expecting us to think. God is expecting us to think based on or knowing as revealed by the wisdom of God. Even increase in travel and knowledge about other cultures, that discussion is there in the book of Daniel. See, it still is accumulating human knowledge. So Jesus is talking about transcending human knowledge altogether. Then the Old Testament talks about, even Jesus, Israel's restored in their land and the Jewish people back in Jerusalem. In spiritual mysteries, what does Israel and what does Jewish people mean? Israel means the church. Jewish people means Christians. See, when we are looking at literally 1 billion people who have already left the church, what does restoration means? In wisdom, what is spreading the gospel means? See, in human intelligence, it means evangelization. An evangelization based on the fear of God and intellectual interpretations of biblical mysteries. So people believe out of fear. And the preaching of prosperity gospel. Meaning, when you believe in Jesus, when you believe in the Bible, you are going to be blessed with a lot of riches. In other words, material blessings. Is that what kingdom living is all about? See, in the wisdom, evangelization is not preaching. In the wisdom, it is the light that shines on us, the light of enlightenment. People will see this light and know who is our God. This is what Jesus said. For the light of wisdom to shine on us, we need to embark on a spiritual journey. Enlightenment does not come by way of knowledge. Enlightenment comes by way of the awareness of all knowing. In wisdom, what is the gathering of Israel? In human intelligence, it is a geopolitical establishment in which several countries participated and the United Nations got involved. But what is it in the wisdom of God? Israelites are the people who reject the church. Jerusalem is where God is established in spirit and the truth. Remember what Jesus said to the Samaritan woman. Those who worship our Father will worship not in the mountains of Samaria, not in the temple in Jerusalem, but in the spirit and the truth. So it is not the preaching we communicate to the lost sheep of Israel. It is the enlightenment, it is the way of enlightenment. It is the journey of enlightenment. That is what we communicate to the lost sheep of Israel. Brothers and sisters, do not fear God. Love Him instead. All those who realize the love of God transcend all fears, even the fear of death. What is there to fear in the second coming? Nothing. Seek His wisdom instead. Wisdom reveals all knowing, even the thoughts of God. Do not judge those who leave the church. Reveal to them the light that shines on you. This is spiritual enlightenment. By your spiritual enlightenment, they will know your God. That is the providence and promise of God, Jesus. Two things I spoke about earlier, and one is about detachment. See, detachment is not getting rid of our loved ones. It is not. It actually involves a lot of loving. But you transcend the attachment we have for them. Detachments mean transcending the attachment. It doesn't mean that we are going to be without them. Does it make sense? We still have them, but we have transcended them. We have transcended the attachment we have for them. And the second thing is, see, in the second coming of Jesus, what Jesus is talking about is the establishment of kingdom on earth. See, establishment of kingdom on earth means everybody is not living by the human knowledge, everybody is living by the wisdom of God, which means enlightenment to everyone. See, so there are two things that is going to happen. Either we embrace spirituality in our lifetime, so we don't need to worry about the second coming, or wait until the second coming is forced upon us, where every one of us becomes spiritual. That's really what it is. See, the death of Jesus is not in vain. Death of Jesus has a purpose, and the purpose is to enlighten every human being on earth. So, on earth, the kingdom of heaven be realized. And we have been not embracing spirituality in more than 2000 years. Ever since the Constantine institutionalized the church, we are becoming more and more institutional, administrative, and intellectual in our thinking. That is why Pope Francis says, a religion without spirituality is only a philosophy. Brothers and sisters, religion is not a belief. Religion is not faith alone. Religion is freedom completely and totally realized. Inner freedom, that is. And that is inner freedom to express love. That's what it is. And that is not even going to begin when all of our belief systems and all of our doctrines are based on fear. So as Jesus said, don't be afraid. It is I.